Hello everyone and welcome to the last day of the FIDE World Cup. Regardless of what happens today, we end it and we will have a winner. So the first two classical games ended in a draw, and now we have a tie breaks between Praggnanandhaa and Magnus. Carlsen. Prague will have the white pieces in the first game. So as throughout the entire cup, they will have two games of rapid chess with 25 minutes per player. Then if those get drawn, then we have 10 minutes per player rapid games. If those get drawn, then we get 5 minutes per player. Those are blitz games. And if those get drawn, we go not into Armageddon, we go into sudden death, which means 3 minutes per player plus 2 seconds increment until one of the players win. So it could go on forever, but we actually hope it does. So let's dive straight into it. Prague has the white pieces in first game, and he opens with pawn to e4. We have pawn to e5 by Magnus, knight f3, knight to c6, and bishop to c4. The Italian game is on the board. Knight to f6, going for the two knights defense, and now not knight to g5, which you all are hoping for. Pawn to d3, the so-called modern bishop's opening. We have bishop to c5, and now pawn to a4. Knight to g5 is a nice idea, but of course, trying it against Magnus, probably nothing good will come from it. So best, stick to the classics. D6, we have castles, and pawn to a5. Magnus stops the future b4. We have bishop to e3, and here Magnus trades and doubles up Prague's central e pawns. But okay, Prague does get the semi-open f file for his rook, and there will be constant pressure on this f7 pawn. So here we have castles and knight b to d2, and here we have knight to e7, and already now, as of move 9, we have a completely new game. So Prague decides to stop knight to g6, he goes knight to h4, and now, well, it seems like a good idea to actually trade off this knight. After captures and captures, this other knight will come to f3, and once this knight comes to g5, there's no way to kick it away from there, and then you'll have this constant pressure of the rook attacking f7, the bishop attacking f7, and the knight attacking f7, and you will not have the h pawn to kick it away from there. So that's why after h6, Magnus goes c6. We have pawn to d5 coming next. Queen to e1 by Prague, preparing queen to g3 to go after Magnus's king, and pawn to d5. We have bishop back to b3, and now queen to d6. This is a very important move because once the queen lands on g3, the threat of rook captures on f3 will be parried by just the queen being on d6. So here we have queen to g3, and now knight to h5. And Magnus really took time to think about this next move, and it's not easy to develop because, like I said, a move like bishop to e6 might sound useful, but it runs into rook captures on f6. You have to have your queen defending the knight here. So instead, knight h5 attacks Prague's queen, and Prague could go for something like queen to f3, and we might even see a draw by repetition here with something like this. But instead, after knight h5, Prague goes queen to g5. He keeps the tension and keeps the queen into the attack. And now Magnus should go back with knight to f6, but he says, nope, my knight is perfectly fine there. I'm going to play g6, and then I'm going to play f6. Kick away your queen. And the Prague should actually allow this. He should play knight to f3, and once f6 is played, queen h4, and okay, at least you ruined Black's king side a little bit. But he doesn't go for that. After this g6 move, he goes for knight to f5 right away. And okay, let's see what happens here. Magnus says, all right, bishop captures on f5, e captures on f5, and now king to g7. You have to stop pawn to f6, so king to g7. Now the queen and king nicely guard the f6 square, and king to h1. And here, Prague probably missed a very important tempo in order to keep the tension. Something like rook 8 to e1 should have been better. I actually have no idea why king to h1 was played, probably to get off the king from this diagonal for some reason. I mean, Prague is obviously an incredibly strong player. He knows why he did it. I cannot, enlighten you in any way of why he did it. But okay, we have queen to f6 by Magnus. Now he takes advantage of Prague playing such a slow move, and Prague now has to trade or move back with queen to g4, but then knight captures on f5 happens, and you're going to have a worse position. So you have to trade queens here. Queen captures, we have knight captures on f6, now f captures on g6, h captures, and pawn to e4. Magnus trades here, d captures, and Prague doesn't want to trade knight, so he plays d captures on e4, and the knight is very good, very nicely placed here. And now you see how rook 8 to e1 probably would have been better in that position, because all of this wouldn't be so appealing to Magnus, because now the pawn would be defended, and next move you could simply go for knight c4, put pressure on e5 and a5. So before doing this, now you're going to have to defend the pawn. So rook 8 to d8. Magnus now stops rook 8 to d1 as the knight here is hanging, and Pragg just goes rook to f2. He says, I don't mind. I actually probably even wanted to play this because now my other rook is coming to f1 and I will have this incredible pressure on the f7 pawn. And Magnus has to choose between two ideas, or rather more ideas, but the crucial one seems to be knight to c8, inviting rook 8 to f1. And now after knight g4, you go into this very tricky line of actually giving up the f7 pawn. Sorry. Rook captures on f7, rook captures, now king comes to h6, and now you have to do something about your knight hanging, so knight to f1, and now knight to d6, attacks the rook and defends the b7 pawn, and once this rook moves, now you capture on e4, and now you have two excellently placed knights, your rook is coming to d1, so this is the active way to play this. But Magnus did not go for this. He went for rook to d4. He just puts pressure on the e4 pawn. And Pragg goes for rook 8 to f1. He says, all right, if you move your knight, I'm just going to start capturing on f7. So we have knight e to g8, and now we have pawn to c3, kicking away the rook. Rook goes back to d7, and now rook to e2. Now the pawn is sufficiently defended, and the knight can move. We have rook to e7, and rook to e7, and now bishop to c2. We have knight to d7, and now knight to c4. Finally, Pragg's knight gets to this active square, and Magnus is forced to go back with the rook. So rook to a8 defends the pawn, and now pawn to g4. Pragg stops any expansion here, and Magnus plays pawn to f6. We have rook to g2 now, and knight to h6, putting pressure on the pawn here, and Pragg just goes for it. Pawn to g5. We have f captures on g5, rook captures. Now the g6 pawn might be a little bit weak if Pragg can get those rooks targeted at the pawn, and knight to f7 chases away the rook, rook to g2, and now rook to e6. The rook will now nicely defend the pawn here. Both Pragg and Magnus are now under 3 minutes, so it's going to be very, very difficult to play this. Rook to d2, Pragg goes after the knight here, rook to f6, defending by attacking, as now the rook on f1 is hanging. Rook captures on f6, knight captures on f6, and now Pragg finally blasts through with pawn to b4. And okay, A captures on b4, C captures on b4, and now king to f8. So now Pragg will have to try to push those pawns on the queen side, whereas Magnus will have to try to activate those knights. If he can get his rook somehow on the second rank or somewhere, and he can activate the knights, then it's going to be good for him. If not, Pragg's bishop should be very, very strong. So king g2, we have king to e7, and now pawn to a5. We have rook back to h8, and now rook to e2. Here we have knight to h5, and now king to g1. We have knight to f4, Magnus slowly but surely activating those knights. Rook to d2, and now comes rook to h3. And here, Pragg was already down to a few seconds on the clock, and Magnus was still up a few minutes, and Pragg should just play a waiting move. There's really no active move for Pragg here. He cannot advance the pawns. There's no good square for the knight. He should play bishop to d1 and just wait. And then he can play king to f1 and wait. It is definitely Magnus who's running the show here. But he went for the active move, pawn to a6. The pressure got to him, and now Magnus simply captured. We have bishop to a4 going after the c6 pawn, and now rook to c3 by Magnus. You could also just take advantage of the weird placement of the king and rook by playing knight to g5. It's a free tempo going for f3, but Magnus first plays rook to c3, attacking the knight, and now Pragg still has a chance to fight with rook to c2, but Pragg played knight to a5, just went for the c6 pawn, and now the position is completely winning for Magnus, and he doesn't squander it. Magnus plays knight to g5, now threatening the fork with knight to f3. We have rook to c2 offering a rook trade, but now knight g to h3 with check, king to f1, and now rook to a3. And you can see that the knights are controlling these three squares, so now Pragg has to choose between a bishop and checkmate on a1. He delivers one more check, knight captures on c6, Magnus just moves away the king, and he was in this position on move 47 that Praggnanandhaa resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Now you will either lose the bishop or you are getting checkmated. There is no way to play this, so of course Pragg resigns this. So what this means is that now Pragg will have to defeat Magnus with the black pieces in the second game of the Rapids if he wants to force more tie breaks. If he wants to force the 10-minute rapid tie breaks. So we'll see what happens. I, of course, am always up for more games, but it's not going to be easy, as Magnus will now be having the white pieces. And if Magnus doesn't want to lose with white, it's going to be very hard. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I will, inform you on what happens in game 2. So stay tuned for that. I would like to thank Franz Pankart, Brendan Mathis, Samiran Ghosh, Rajashi Chaudhuri, and Robert Bloom for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, like I said, with the second game of the tie breaks. So, stay tuned for that. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.